10 Best General Motors Cars. GM used to be a king during its time, which lasted from 1931 to 2007. Not necessarily each year and each month during that time, but in general, you could say GM ruled the territory, particularly from the 50s through 90s. In fact, it was only in 2007 that Toyota surpassed GM as the largest automobile manufacturer. Year 2007 didn't bring anything too dramatic, just 500,000 more vehicles by Toyota. But more importantly, it reflected not only the poor financial state of GM at that time, but also its losses since 2000 in its European market. The losses from Europe has added up to more than $15 billion for GM, so it's not a surprise that GM is thinking of quitting Europe altogether. But all this said and done, the tycoon of America have produced some of the best cars in automotive history. Let's look into those cars. 1966 Oldsmobile Toronado. What started out as just a design painting by Oldsmobile stylist David North actually became a legendary car, not just in the US but in Europe also. In fact, the Oldsmobile Toronado ranked third in the 1966 European Car of the Year contest, a feat no other US car had achieved in the past. That award is not free candy, folks. Eligible cars must be made available in at least 5 European countries and have a relatively high anticipated sales volume. But earning the third place in the European award was not what this car was all about. Its historical significance comes from being the first US-based front-wheel drive car. The car had some cool powertrain features, such as a new transmission and a carburetor, which probably helped its fame. And the exterior looks bold as ever. (1959) Cadillac DeVille. If you thought the Bugatti Veyron had a unique rear, wait until you see the '59 Cadillac DeVille, whose rear was just a polarizing design with the large, sharp tail fins and dual bullet taillights. These features made the car famous back in the day, either because you loved the car or hated it, but the average person couldn't be just a bystander. A notable fact is if you look at the car from the rear three-quarter view, you can easily misconstrue the rear for the front. While the exterior was what it was, the interior, in certain respects, was even more fabulous. The luxuries were just unmatched with its power windows, power steering, power seats, 2-speed wipers, and power brakes. You can deduce that the car wasn't a chore for drivers. (1987) Buick Grand National GNX. While Buick isn't GM's best investment in terms of what people perceive the Buick to be, although GM makes a respectable profit from Buick sales in China, the GNX was a totally different story. This car was a beast, which you can imagine would be the case for a car that was sent to McLaren Performance Technologies to get upgrades, meaning it got a huge turbocharged V6 engine that generated so much power that it reached 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 4.7 seconds, respectable by today's standard and otherworldly by that time's standard. Only 547 GNXs were made. While the asking price was around $35,000 in 1987, it wasn't uncommon for people to pay as much as $75,000 or even $100,000. The current asking price would be in the $140,000 till $200,000 range. (1964) Pontiac GTO. GM had done a lot of things during its time during the 60s and the 70s, though you wouldn't necessarily be proud of all that it had done, including the creation of what some might call the first muscle car, the Pontiac GTO. While the GTO was just an optional package on the Pontiac Tempest in the first 2 model years, its success forced GM to create it as an independent lineup starting from '66. Intended to attract the speed-minded youth market, the GTO was outfitted with a V8 and a body that was also only of moderate size, or at least nothing like the bonkers of those days. Unlike the other cars that cost so much money for similar power, the GTO was relatively cheap, meaning it was an instant hit. 1969 Chevrolet Camaro. The whole idea of the Camaro was just an amazing concept. Built to compete with the Mustang, from whose sale Ford had made a fortune, GM created the powerful, gorgeous Camaro in 1966. The 69 Camaro, unlike the previous model years, looked more aggressive with its lower height, angry grille, and rear valance panel. Not only did it receive several accolades upon its release and sold ridiculously well, but the 69 also had the honor of being the Indy 500 pace car. This is also the same car that inspired Chevy to produce the Camaro of 2010. Of course, if you judge it by today's standards, the 69 Camaro is going to fail in all the aspects, performance to safety to handling. But when compared it to its contemporaries, you realize it was a true gem. 2018 Cadillac CTS-V. It would have been equally fine to put the base model CTS in this entry, rather than the high-performance version CTS-V. This is one of those lineups that turned Cadillac's and GM's fate, and I say that because GM has produced some really terrible cars. Like it'd be easier to come up with 20 worst cars made by GM than 20 sickest cars produced by General Motors. Anyway, the interior of the CTS-V is teeming with high-quality materials. The seats are very sporty yet hug you kindly, the gauge cluster looks very shiny with its high-quality resolution, and the overall impression of the interior is excellent. From the outside, the car looks like it's Batman's daily driver, and with 640 horsepower and similar foot-pound of torque, it's not too difficult for the car to act like one. 1940 Cadillac Series 90 V16. While not a lot of people are going to like the exterior of this car, the car was, in reality, a piece of work back in its day. What you see in the Bugatti Veyron today, the 16-cylinder piston, was present in this bad boy 90 years ago. The first one came out in 1930. It was the first car to have that type of engine in the US, so you shouldn't be surprised to know that it was the fastest accelerating car from 1938 to 1940. The engine wasn't the only thing to enthrall the public. Caddy went all the way to Europe to find the finest coach builders, who put a bespoke body on each chassis. Naturally, these cars competed with the likes of Bugatti and Duesenberg at that time. '57 Chevrolet Bel-Air. This car is such an iconic car that some might even consider it having outdone the reputation of the Ford Model T introduced a few years after the World War II. The car became an all-time favorite of the middle class after a few months of skepticism. While it had been in production since 1949, it wasn't until the end of the second generation in 1957 that the Bel-Air gained its fame. Perhaps the two-door sport coupe and the convertible come to your mind when you think of the Bel-Air. You wouldn't be wrong if that was the case, as those were the most famous images of the Bel-Air. Some argue that its success has a downside to it, as either the car's charm is taken for granted now or relegated to its luck of being in sync with its contemporary fashion trends. Chevrolet Corvette ZR1 C6. This is a difficult entry to cover because of how much I have to say. Now, the Corvette is an all-time favorite of Americans. It's the car that a lot of people aspire to have, and some even make that dream a reality. But the ZR1 is a different can of worms. You've probably heard that this car is essentially a supercar with a price that's half or even a third of that of a supercar. although the interior isn't necessarily like that of a Ferrari or any other high-end cars. But with a supercharged V8 generating 638 horsepower, 604 foot-pound of torque, and 3.4 seconds 0 to 60 time, it truly gave the supercars a tough contest. And if you check out the C7ZR1, you realize it has even more power. The 2017 Chevrolet Silverado. This one goes out to all the truck fans out there. The Silverado is one of the best trucks on the market today, having made its way into the market when the desire for pickup trucks was ever growing in the late 90s. Trucks like the Silverado are handsome and rugged from the outside and from the inside. They have all the features and space that a truck fan would like to have. And just because it's a truck, it doesn't mean you can't have luxury at your fingertips. Just grab the upscale High Country Edition, and you'll find yourself bathed in brown leather and utmost comfortable seats. Of course, it's a truck, so you'll find yourself burdened with several bed options. Overall, it's probably the best truck offered by General Motors. Do you agree with our list? Maybe we missed out something. Please let us know in comments section down below. And if you like this video, please like, share and consider subscribing and turn on bell notifications for more awesome videos.